First Descendant is a brand new third-person looter shooter that just came out about a week ago now. I did review the game on its launch day, but since then I've put a lot more hours into it, so naturally I have a lot more thoughts that I want to share with you. But the First Descendant was not a game that I was necessarily looking forward to at all. It wasn't even on my radar. I just reviewed it because it was a new game, and that's what I do on this channel. I play and I review new games, but I was not expecting how addicted to this game I was going to become, just how much fun I was going to have with it. And in this video, I just want to go over the main reasons why I think the First Descendant is absolutely worth checking out at the very least. It's a free-to-play game, and why I think it warrants some of your time. But of course, I will go over some of the negative aspects of the game as well. But anyway, I'm going to show you some raw gameplay. I'm going to jump into the review, but before I do that, hit that subscribe button. I talk about video games all the time on this page. Day one reviews, video game discussions, that sort of thing. But I also talk about and review movies and TV shows as well. Also, one last thing that I think is worth mentioning before we get into the review. I'm by no means a live service game junkie or genius. I'm not the type of person that can explain to you the meta builds and the intricacies and how this game compares its grind to other games in the same genre. I'm sure there's a bunch of videos on YouTube that do that if that's what you're looking for, but in this video, it's just from the perspective of some dude that's having fun shooting guns and killing enemies. But anyway, into the review we go. So the first positive thing I want to shout out in this game is just how fun and addictive I find the core gameplay to be. Of course, this is subjective, but this style of third-person shooter gunplay, mixed with what I find to be super satisfying and fun to use abilities and skills, is pretty much exactly what I'm looking for in a game like this. And at the end of the day, it's the main reason why I find myself loading up this game over and over. Whenever there's a lull in the day, or when I have nothing to do, I find myself just frothing at the mouth a bit because I need my fix. And I know, of course, this is a live service game and it's designed to be addictive and to keep you playing to the point you just start questioning your own sanity. And I'll talk about the live service elements in a bit for sure, but for me, that's not the main reason I'm having fun with the First Descendant. I'm not logging in to grind. I'm not logging in to try and get a new weapon or to unlock some stupid materials. I'm logging in because I just love the core gameplay. The shooting feels wicked satisfying, and all the different kinds of guns feel distinct and different from each other, even different weapons within the same category. So for example, an assault rifle isn't gonna feel identical to a different assault rifle, and no two shotguns feel the same either, and I fucking love the beam rifles. Whenever a game has a laser beam weapon, it already gets a couple bonus points in my head, and this game arguably has the best feeling beam rifle I've used in a video game. The next thing that this game does really well, and it's probably what surprised me the most as I played through the game, is that there's a great amount of different boss fights, and they all feel distinct and they encourage different kinds of gameplay. One of the biggest flaws with so many live service games these days is that there's just a horrible lack of enemy variety. And even if the enemies are different on paper, it feels exactly the same to fight them in practice. I'm not sure how many of you watching this were on the ground day one for the original Destiny game, or even the OG Destiny 2 campaign as well, but those games had a horrible habit of throwing the same boss fight at us over and over and over again. And same with The Division, another game that I loved and I spent so many goddamn hours in. Bosses in that game acted exactly like regular enemies, just with an insane amount of health. And maybe, just maybe, if we were lucky, they'd throw a couple extra grenades or something stupid like that. But that's not the case in the First Descendant at all. I keep getting blindsided whenever a new boss battle happens in this game because, again, they just always feel different. They look different. They have different mechanics, different weak spots. They have different buffs. They recommend different builds, all that sort of thing. Sometimes I'll just start to feel a bit burnt out in this game, like the shallowness will start to appear, and I'll start to question just how many hours of playtime time is left in the tank for me, but then I'll do a new boss fight and it will definitely re-motivate me because I start to realize there's still a lot about this game that is surprising. And I'm not just talking about the void intercept battles, by the way, like the big main boss fights, but even smaller bosses and sub-bosses and other missions often feel a lot different from each other as well. So it really makes this game a lot more replayable and a lot more fun to grind than most other live service games that I've played. The third thing I want to mention is something I touched on briefly in my original review, but I want to elaborate on it here because it's a lot better than I initially thought. But the First Descendant handles multiplayer in a shared world shooter practically perfect in my opinion. Again, I said this before, but it's worth mentioning again, but so many looter shooters have absolutely butchered and had horrible multiplayer in matchmaking, especially when they launched. The Suicide Squad had virtually no multiplayer for a long time when it launched because of just broken servers. And the same thing happened to Outriders, a game where, again, I loved the gameplay and I thought it had a surprisingly decent story, but the multiplayer aspects were broken at launch, and what should have been a multiplayer experience just turned into nothing but solo gameplay. The First Descendant not only has working multiplayer and servers at launch, but the way it implements it into the game is just so smooth. Obviously, you see a ton of players in Albion, the hub world, but you see a lot of players out in the world as well. And you don't need to matchmake with people in order to group with them while you're out in the world doing random missions and quests. If there's a random player doing the same mission as you at the same time, the game will just automatically group you guys up together. So you'll start to see their name on the side of the screen, and you'll see their status as well, that sort of thing. And then when the mission ends, it automatically disbands your temporary group. And it's just a lot more fun than other games like this, where it often just feels like you're questing next to other people instead of with other people. And matchmaking into the Void Intercept missions and matchmaking into this game's version of dungeons is practically instantaneous. You're never waiting more than 10 seconds to find a full group of 4 people, really, no matter what kind of content you're trying to run either. And so far, the community seems wicked cool too. I was surprised at how often, after grouping up with random people, they'd send a quick like GG or thanks into the party chat, and I've even had a surprising amount of people friend request me after we did a mission together. Of course though, this could change fast. For all I know, the player base could dry up at an alarming rate, and in my experience, gaming communities are always the best when a game first launches. After the new game phase wears off, games are usually littered with mostly just people that take the game and themselves far too seriously. So if you want to experience this game in its purest form socially, I would definitely jump in sooner than later. But of course, there are some gaming communities that are absolutely the exception to the rule, and the First Descendant could be one of those. The last positive thing I want to mention for now is that I find the live service elements to be pretty well executed so far, but full transparency, even though I have a decent amount of hours in at this point, I'm still not in the true end game. I still haven't started to feel the genuine live service grind, but just playing through the main story, running some boss fights and dungeons on repeat, as of now, I'm feeling pretty well satisfied with the pace I'm leveling up and the pace that I'm gearing up. Better gear drops at just an insane rate. I'm not even exaggerating, but assuming you're doing missions and just killing enemies, you'll probably find a gun better than the ones you have equipped every 15 to 20 minutes, if not sooner. And I find the way that you upgrade your weapons and your characters to be super streamlined in a good way. I'm usually a big dumb idiot when it comes to stats and upgrading and all that sort of thing when it comes to a live service game, but here in the First Descendant, it just feels, I don't know, clean, for lack of a better term. You find different weapon modules that give different buffs, like, I don't know, plus 15% critical damage or plus 10% reload speed, and you just equip them, but then they easily carry over to your new weapons when you find new weapons. And modules for your characters are just as easy to grasp, and you earn better ones at practically the same rate that you earn better weapons. And then there's Descendants. What's probably the biggest draw to this game and what's going to keep people playing the most is the grind to unlock the new characters. And for the most part, what you need to unlock new Descendants will be obtained through just simply playing the game and progressing through the story missions. But there is a couple components you'll need to grind for. But like I said earlier, I love the core gameplay and I love the core abilities and I love it enough to want to grind to unlock those new characters, but I can see this being where the game truly becomes a grind to the point where honestly a lot of people might not want to play anymore. And this leads me into some of the negative thoughts and some of the concerns that I have with the First Descendant so far. The first being, again, the potential grind that'll be required to unlock new Descendants. The game lets you choose one from the start, and then you unlock the second one pretty quickly after that, but once that happens, you'll notice a long gap before you have the opportunity to unlock the third. And again, I'm not super deep into this game or the end game by any means, but I'm starting to think the grind after a certain threshold may outweigh the fun that I'm actually having, and that is a bit worrisome for me. But with that being said, when it comes to all the live service gameplay mechanics, you know, the sort of live service things that's in every game like this, whether it be this, Warframe, Destiny 2, The Division, The Suicide Squad, any of them, I genuinely think the First Descendant does one of the better jobs of being a live service game, especially at launch. But probably the biggest flaw that I have with the game personally is that the story is just absolute ass. I'm a person that, yes, I care more about gameplay in a video game first and foremost, but of course, I love when a game has a great story to follow, or even a decent story. And there's been a lot of games that I've played where the story left a lot to be desired, but I still found myself finding something within the narrative to cling to have a story reason for doing what I'm doing, something to just give a shit about the plot and the characters in the world. But the First Descendant has arguably the most boring, generic, cliche story that I've experienced in a video game. It's just a lot of generic, paint-by-numbers characters without a single unique thing about them, saying a lot of meaningless sci-fi bullshit that sounds like it was written by AI. And this is coming from a dude who loves sci-fi. And a lot of my favorite stories of all time are in the genre of just epic science fiction. And this in the First Descendant, this story is just absolute garbage. I tried to get into the story when I first started the game, and I just couldn't do it. Then after a good handful of hours, when I started to realize that maybe I do genuinely like this game, I figured maybe the story was starting to get good too, so I tried to give the story another chance. And I tried to retune my brain into paying attention again to give it the benefit of the doubt, and it was just bad and boring, even more bad and boring than I remembered in the beginning of the game. But anyway, that's my thoughts after playing the First Descendant for a good handful of hours, and why overall I think it's a game that you should try. You should give the benefit of the doubt. Again, you might not like it, and that's fine, but it's free to play, and I think this game has a lot of potential for a live service game. Have you tried it out yet? If you have, let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments, and if you haven't tried it out yet, thanks for watching this video as long as you did, and let me know, did I convince you? Are you going to give it a shot, or are you still going to skip it? And if you're going to skip it, let me know why, because I'm genuinely curious, and I look forward to hearing from you either way. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.